you everyone for creating time this wonderful morning to join this series of conference sessions that has been put together by a coalition of organizations that are represented here by all of you. We are very honored and very glad, very excited to have you today, and we look forward to a very exciting session as we discuss matters to do with monitoring forest and landscape restoration in this country. My name is Peter Ndunda. I am a senior associate at World Resource Institute. I lead our forest and landscape restoration work here in Kenya. I will be moderating this session. My co-moderator is Lucy Warungi, who is the Executive Director at African Conservation Center. Lucy, would you kindly introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, Peter, and thank you. Good morning, everyone. Lucy Warungi is my name, Director of African Conservation Center, and keenly looking forward to the session on monitoring approaches, which is critical if we're to succeed in the restoration agenda. So welcome and look forward to interacting more later.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for that introduction. We're going to start this session by looking back at the opening remarks from the Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Tobiko. Waziri reminded us that it is extremely important for us at this point to start thinking towards coordinated forest and landscape restoration monitoring. We know that in this country, we have amazing experiences and activities that are happening on the ground in forest and landscape restoration. We are all doing amazing work on the ground, but we have not been able to bring all that together to be able to tell the stories, to be able to report against the targets that this country has set, whether we're talking about the 10% tree cover or whether we are talking about the 5% continental target to FR 100, or whether it is the climate change targets that this country has set together. So we need in this forum, as we continue with our discussion, we need to look back and say, look, what is it we have learned over the years at the project level in terms of monitoring, in terms of tracking progress, in terms of reporting that progress? What can we bring together to allow us to be more coordinated, to integrate those lessons and report progress towards these national targets? And so in this session, we will embed all those lessons into existing platforms, specifically the FOLAREP, which is the Forest and Landscape Restoration Action Plan that is being led by the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources and Kenya Forest Service to bring us together to implement an integrated monitoring framework for tracking and reporting progress towards the national targets, the 10% tree cover and the 5.1 million hectares restoration target. I want to transition this conversation to our amazing speakers that we have lined up for today. And to start us off is my dear colleague, Rose Akombo, Madam Rose Akombo, who works with KFS. Rose Akombo is the Principal Conservator of Forests at KFS. Rose will tell us more about FOLAREP, which is the Forest Landscape Restoration Action Plan that KFS has been leading many of us, the institutions that are represented here today, to put together to give us a roadmap of how we are going to achieve this 10% tree cover, as well as the 5.1 million hectares target. In addition to that, Rose Akombo will share with us a little bit on how do we integrate the monitoring aspects of the work that we are doing and the reporting into this framework that is being built, that Waziri, our Cabinet Secretary, talked about last week. Over to you, Rose. We're going to give you 10 minutes to give us an overview. Thank you, Rose.
I have the privilege to take you through what we are doing as a country in terms of forest and landscape restoration monitoring. This is a process that was initiated sometimes back in 2019, and it's being driven by a multi-stakeholder process. It is informed by the opportunity assessment, national opportunity assessment study that was done in 2016 that informed the current commitment of 5.1 million hectares. It's also informed by the global, national, and subnational policies and strategies that we have in the country are geared to support landscape restoration. Looking back at the Kenya's commitment, Kenya is a signatory to several international conventions, including the Paris Agreement, also the Convention on Biological Biodiversity, the UNNCCD Land Neutrality Targets, and also the Bond Challenge commitments. And so as a country, we have committed to restore 5.1 million hectares of deforested and degraded landscapes. We also committed to increase and maintain 10% tree cover by 2030. We also have a presidential decree to ensure that by 2022, this has been achieved. Kenya is also committed as part of the Paris Agreement through the updated NDC to reduce 50% of our greenhouse gas emission from the forestry sector. And to achieve all these commitments, we have come up with supporting national policies, legislation, strategies, and programs, as been mentioned by Peter, and also was alluded to by the minister when he did the opening of this national conference. To achieve these national efforts, there have been several efforts in the country to achieve the national aspirations of 10% tree cover and international obligations that we have as a country. And as been mentioned, we are currently leading a multi-stakeholder process to develop a forest and landscape implementation plan 2021-2025 with support from FAO, JEF6, the Restoration Initiative Project, which is focusing on restoration on arid and semi-arid lands through bioenterprise development and other incentives. Because as we promote restoration efforts, we also need to address issues of socioeconomic development and livelihood issues. FOLAREP is a 5-year plan, an ambitious 5-year plan that aims at accelerating actions to restore deforested and degraded landscape for resilient socioeconomic development, improve ecological functions, and of course, to support the realization of our commitments. And we are excited about this process because as a country, we were able to map 38.8 million hectares of degraded areas that have potential for restoration. But out of 38.8 million hectares, we were only able to commit 5.1 million hectares informed by our national circumstances. But through these initiatives, we can even scale up to more, we can scale up our targets to ensure that all the degraded areas are restored. So the plan aims to put 2.5 million hectares of deforested and degraded landscape by 2025. It proposes an establishment of an integrated monitoring framework and a multi-stakeholder monitoring technical laptop. So we are saying that there's so much efforts going on in the country, but without an integrated monitoring framework, that we are not able to adequately document this progress and report it as part of our national and international reporting. So the technical working group will comprise of government, ministries, departments, and agencies. We are also ensuring that the councils of government, councils of governors, and the entire county governments are involved in this process, and also the non-state actors, which have capacity to support monitoring and reporting framework. And these non-state actors have been very, very supportive in implementing restoration efforts, but also supporting the government in ensuring that this process is taken to the next level. So for us to be able to effectively coordinate this process, the plan has come up with a coordination framework that is anchored to the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, because we have a wide range of stakeholders that are involved in landscape restoration activities. And this ranges between different government levels, but also different actors on the ground. And so the Ministry of Environment and Forestry is taking the leadership and coordination role to ensure that all these different actors are coordinated and their efforts are appreciated. And also, this will also help us to map the resources that are available in the country and adequately build synergies to ensure that we are able to achieve the target of 5.1 million hectares. Basically, the ministry will play a facilitative role and also provide an enabling policy environment to support this process. So at the apex, we have the National FLR Advisory Committee, which will be chaired by our cabinet secretary, but co-chaired by the chairman of Environment Council of Governors. And basically, their role will be advisory and oversight role. They'll also support setting the agenda. Even for us to come up with the 5.1 million hectares, it is the CS Ministry of Environment and Forestry that set the target of 5.1 million hectares. So we are looking at this committee that they'll support the process by setting the agenda and priorities for forest and landscape restoration in the country. They will also support mobilization of financial and technical resources for implementation of this plan and many other restoration initiatives in the country. The second committee is on the National FLR Steering Committee. This is basically like any other project steering committee we have, but all these are anchored to existing frameworks in the ministry, and therefore this steering committee will guide the implementation of the plan. They'll be the ones who are reviewing and approving the work plans and budget. They will also review and approve various policy review that we'll have suggested, and on emerging issues and even harmonization of some of the policy frameworks which could support FLR implementation. Well, then after the steering committee, we'll have the National FLR Technical Committee. The technical committee basically are composed of technical working group, technical experts from these different ministries, departments, and agencies, and also the non-state actors that are passionate or are committed to landscape restoration. And it is within this technical committee that we'll have the National Technical Working Group, monitoring working group that will drive the monitoring agenda, because we all appreciate that if we are not able to report on what we are doing, then basically the rest of the efforts and the investment are in vain. So this is the core team that will drive this process to ensure that we are able to monitor progress and also report on our achievements. Then of course we'll have the secretariat that will support, the National FLR Secretariat that will support all this committee in coming, ensuring that their activities are done. This will also support the effective communication between the county government and the national government. And at the county level, we'll have the County Environment Committee, which is of course, at the county level are the ones dealing with environmental matters, including forest and landscape restoration. And this environment committee also has a composition of most of land-based sectors, experts, and will support implementation at the county level. And so finally, in terms of how the FOLAREP monitoring framework is proposed, this framework will be linked to the existing monitoring framework at national and county levels, and also at project and landscape level. What we are saying here is that we already have existing monitoring framework, as was presented during the FLR monitoring webinar that we had in April. And we are not going to reinvent the wheel, but we are going to ensure that the proposed monitoring framework for the plan is linked to the proposed monitoring framework. At the ministerial level, we have the integrated MRB framework, which is basically in reporting on climate change activities in the country. It's also used to report for the National Climate Change Action Plan achievement. And it's basically ensuring that all sectors are able to report on their climate actions and their achievement. Then we have the National Forest Monitoring System, which is also going to support the reporting of forest and land REDD+ activities. This is a system that is already there, and my colleague David Chege will present on it today. And so basically this will more or less present activities around the forest landscape. Then we'll have the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Monitoring Framework, reporting on activities related to the agricultural landscape and also the rangelands. Then we have the next monitoring framework, that is Kenya Water Tower Monitoring Framework, which is basically geared towards reporting the status of water towers and riparian areas in the country. And then this will respond to our critical landscape around the wetlands and riparian areas. And then under development is the Forest and Landscape Portal, which is being done at KEFRI through the support of FAO GEF6 project. And this will provide a central management for FLR knowledge in Kenya, whereby we can also access information, but also share success stories and lesson learned from our restoration initiative. Of course, at the county level, there are also monitoring frameworks, especially for monitoring the CIDPs, and we will be glad to link up with the county level monitoring framework. And not forgetting a lot of activities that are being taken on board. And we have several projects that are running up in the country that are supporting forest landscape restoration activities. And so at project level, they are already monitoring frameworks that were shared with us during the landscape restoration webinar, that we would also want to ensure that these frameworks are also the FOLAREP monitoring framework is also taking into consideration existing framework. And all these frameworks have identified indicators and parameters that need to be monitored to inform FLR activities. What we need to do as a technical working group is ensuring that we are going to come up with a standard, a very clear way of monitoring. We need to come up with common monitoring indicators so that all our achievements can be, the reporting format can be in a way that it's communicating to all the activities that are being implemented for common reporting. So we need to come up with a common reporting template and also harmonize the indicators that are used for reporting. So that's it, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rose. Thank you for sharing with us the overview of this forward-looking forest and landscape restoration action plan. We will come back to you, Rose, in a few minutes to seek some clarification from participants. Kindly share your questions on the chat. We will also sample some of them and respond on the chat, and we will also give a few participants an opportunity to ask the questions verbally. And our next speaker for today is Dr. Winnie Musila, who is the Director for Ecosystem Research, Planning and Audit Department at the Kenya Water Towers Agency. Winnie will share with us their experience at KWTA, the Kenya Water Tower Agency, on the implementation of a forest and landscape restoration monitoring framework for the Kenya's water towers across the country. Winnie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my presentation. I'll be speaking about an integrated monitoring system that we are developing for sustainable management of the water towers in Kenya. Just to give an overview of what are these water towers, we refer the water towers as the uplands or the elevated landscapes that are able to receive precipitation and release the water in form of springs, rivers, and streams. So vegetation is very important in these ecosystems because it's the one which helps in storage of the water or storage of the precipitation. In Kenya, we know that we have the 5 major water towers. For example, we have the Mount Kenya, the Aberdares, the Mau Forest Complex, we have the Cherangani and the Mount Elgon, which are known to provide at least 75% of the service water. And apart from this, we have other smaller water towers that have been identified. 18 of them are gazetted so far. So as you can see, they are spread all over the country. Yeah, and the main importance of this ecosystem is that, without water, we know water is life. Without water, all the key sectors like agriculture, the energy sector, tourism, manufacturing, and health, because, the water towers are the main source of water that helps to support these sectors. If you look at agriculture cannot, exist without water. Look at the electricity, we have the HEP generation, all that is dependent on water. It's very important that we conserve our water towers because they serve as the sources of water. Yeah, so based on this, in 2012, the Kenya Water Towers Agency was created, which was mandated to coordinate and oversee protection, rehabilitation, conservation, and sustainable management of all the water towers in Kenya. As I mentioned, apart from the 18 that are gazetted, we have other smaller water towers that have been identified, which need to be conserved. And if you look at the drylands, the water towers play a very important role. For example, if you go to northern Kenya, we have the Huri, we have the Mount Marsabit, all those are water towers which support the livelihoods in those areas. Now, the Kenya Water Tower Agency, in order to coordinate and oversee sustainable management of water towers, has one strategic objective, which is to oversee the ecosystem health and resilience of these ecosystems are maintained. And for us to achieve this objective, we require information. We require reliable and timely information so that we can support decision-making and action. For us to know which areas need to be restored, which areas are being degraded, it's important that we have reliable and timely information. It's against this that we found that it's very important to come up with a monitoring system that will be able to support us in decision-making. And we realize that for us to coordinate and oversee sustainable management of water towers, there's the information barriers, and of course they affect restoration of these ecosystems. And therefore, we found there is inadequate information. You cannot get, before you could not get any information that tells you about the status of the water towers. If you want to know which stakeholders are working in which water tower, if you want to know the physical characteristics of a particular water tower, you could hardly get any information. And then also another thing that we established is that there's a generally uncoordinated approach across partners on monitoring ecosystem health. In terms of data collection, how is data collected, for example, on particular parameter? How is it analyzed? How is it processed? How is it managed? So that is also a big gap or information barrier that, of course, affects restoration of these ecosystems. And then also another issue is lack of a centralized data platform. You find that data is scattered all over. You can hardly, get a central place where data is stored. And then also another thing is that there's no clear mechanism on sharing data. Although we have many agencies that are collecting data on particular parameters within the water towers, we don't have protocols. We don't have, documented or policies on how we can share data so that it can assist in restoring this ecosystem. Another gap that we found is that there's limited capacity to monitor the status and health of water towers, because first, we don't even know which indicators to monitor or which metrics to use for particular parameters. And generally, we found these limited long-term monitoring programs, the systematic collection and archiving of data. So the Kenya Water Tower Agency came up with the first, the idea or the concept of coming up with a monitoring system whereby we'll have a platform where data of the various aspects that affect the health of the water towers is stored. And we developed an integrated monitoring system for collecting and integrating data from various stakeholders. And this platform, we are able to visualize water tower information via a web platform. And the reason why we came up with this monitoring system is that it will enable us come up with the updated, comprehensive, and reliable data, it has also enabled us to come up with a monitoring, data protocols and systems so that, we can share data, because there's no agency that can collect all the data that is required to monitor particular aspect, all the aspects within an ecosystem. And then another thing why it is important to come up with a monitoring system is that it ensures us to come up with consistent, comprehensive monitoring of key elements within the water tower ecosystem. And it also provides a means of tracking impact of projects and programs. So I'll share briefly the process that we undertook to come up with a monitoring system. One, this was a multi-stakeholder driven process whereby we formed a technical working group comprising of 18 institutions. I've listed down there the institutions. So they range from Kenya Forest Service, the Council of Governors, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Energy, National Museums of Kenya, Water Resource Authority. And we got technical support from the World Resources Institute. For us to come up with an integrated monitoring system, it's important we come up with a common vision. We bring our heads together and really identify what parameters we really need to monitor. And one thing that we did was to define the goals. If you want to see a sustainably managed water tower, what is our goal? What do you want to see at the end of the day? And from this technical working group, we're able to come up with 3 major goals. One goal was that we want to see improved conservation of water towers and ecosystem. And from that goal, we were able to identify what parameters we need to monitor. For example, we need to monitor the soil health, we need to monitor the water quality and quantity, the biodiversity, the air. Then another goal is on improved productivity and use of water tower provisioning services. For example, if it's food, what products do we need to monitor to see improved productivity? Food productivity of communities who are living around the water tower. The same case with water. You need to see water improve, the water quality improved. Then the other goal was an enabling policy and institution. Unless we have an enabling policy, then we cannot achieve all this. So again, we identified which parameters need to be monitored to address these parameters. So the technical working group came up with the water towers monitoring framework. And this framework provides a guidance on indicators, the metric, the criteria for monitoring within the water towers. And so we were, out of the 3 goals, we were able to come up with 256 indicators. And out of this, of course, monitoring is quite an expensive affair. So we were able to prioritize 76 indicators that already can, we can get data and monitor. So just a highlight on the criteria we used to identify the 76 priority indicators. One, we looked at the aspect of the cost of monitoring. If it is too expensive to monitor a parameter, then we didn't prioritize that indicator. Then the issue of data availability. Some of the data already exists from various agencies. And then the technical capacity. Do you really need, a lot of technical capacity to monitor that indicator? Accessibility of data, ethical issues, the relevance and effectiveness of that indicator. So based on this criteria, we were able to prioritize on 76 indicators that, data is already available, it is accessible. And from these indicators, it can already provide a signal on what is happening within the water towers. So the next was now translating the framework into a system. So what we have achieved so far is that we've been able to develop a prototype of the system. And from this prototype, then we've been able to come up with a dashboard, algorithms of data integration. Because remember, we are getting data from various stakeholders and from various aspects. Then we've also been able to develop data sharing agreements or protocols. And then we have piloted the system in 3 water towers, Cherangani, Makuli, and Eastern Mau. And then another important thing was now training champions from the various institutions. How would we be getting data from the various institutions? So this is just a snapshot of the monitoring system. As I've mentioned, it's a web-based monitoring system. So we have a homepage, we have dashboards, we have identified ways on visualizing that data, either in terms of maps, in terms of graphs, so that you can know the trends of what is happening in a particular water tower. The key functionalities of this system is that it integrates data that is collected from various institutions in form of maps and graphs, and that is presented in form of the dashboard. And then we can also integrate global data sets like forest fire alerts, global emissions. And then we can also provide alerts on deforestation of the various water towers. It can also show degraded areas. And of course, that information is very key if we want to identify a priority area for rehabilitation. And another key thing about this system is that we're able to customize data processing. So if you want to carry out your own analysis on the dashboard, then you can select particular parameters on land cover statistics. For example, land cover statistics, if you want to know what has been happening in a particular area over a period of time, then you can do that from the system. So the key lessons we have learned so far is that, for us to have an integrated monitoring system, it's very important that you have goodwill among institutions. And then also there's need to have skilled personnel, because as you can see, this is a process that involves a lot of data integration, a lot of data processing. So you need skilled personnel on data science and system development. There's need for capacity building of institution on data management, because in some cases you go and you find that, yes, there is data, maybe just stored in form of an Excel sheet. So data management, that's an area that we found really needs support in capacity building in various institutions. And then also the issue of, coming up with mobile apps to provide, the aspect of crowd sourcing of data. So you reduce the aspect of data collection. And then the issue of data sharing protocols, there's really need to come up with data sharing protocols, because yes, we collect all this data, but then what can you conclude out of it if it's only data of a particular parameter? So the integration is very important. And for us to share data, we need to come up with guidelines on that. So for us to really have an integrated approach, the other partners need to know what is there for us. What do I gain out of this? So like for the case of the monitoring system of the water towers, it's not a Kenya water tower monitoring system alone. It is for the 18 institutions, who are providing data. They can gain a lot. They can understand what is happening in those ecosystems. So it's a win-win strategy, to allow successful implementation of the monitoring system. Thank you very much.
Dr. Winnie Musila, thank you so much for this wonderful and very informative presentation that you've shared with us. You've given us an overview of your very inclusive process that you took in the development of the integrated Kenya water towers monitoring system, the objectives, why you were doing it. You've talked at length about the functionalities that you've built into the system and into the framework. And most important, you've shared with us the lessons from your process, the lessons that we need to take into consideration as we are working towards an integrated monitoring framework for the national FLR monitoring and reporting. So thank you very much. We will come back to you at the question and answer sessions. In the meantime, we shall proceed to our next speaker to share with us experiences from their implementation process on monitoring and reporting tools at Kenya Forest Service. My brother, Mr. David Chege, head of the Forest Monitoring System at Kenya Forest Service. The floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, Peter. I was very keen and also listening to Dr. Musila and the very good presentation, and I will straight away join to also give the perspective of Kenya Forest Service. My name once again is David Chege, and I work at Kenya Forest Service. I'm in charge of information, forest resources and information management. I will give a brief presentation on how we participate in monitoring as a service to track the restoration processes that are happening within the country. Yes, I will look at how this is going to be done, and by way of acknowledging is that we are, of course, related as a raw forest cover country, and that a lot of restoration effort needs to be done. And just like I've been said since last week when the CS opened the meeting, is that we need to do a lot to restore, and that we need to observe our commitment towards land restoration, climate change, and biodiversity, and for which all the activities that we undertake within the service and together with our stakeholders is what we are trying to observe. And we're looking at the priority landscape restoration areas that we focus in as a service. You well know that we are the lead agency in terms of forest activities in this country. And therefore, we not only focus in areas that are public forest, but also areas that are outside public forest, working very closely with both the stakeholders and communities that are therein. And in so doing, we participate in forestation of natural forests, whether private or public, rehabilitation of degraded natural forests. Again, most of these will find them in public forest. Agroforestry on farmlands. We work very closely with the counties and the farmers where we practice agroforestry, and a number of activities are held within there, which we actually get to know and are very interested in tracking. Commercial plantation, as you know, is another area of interest where, because of production of wood, we are very closely, working with the stakeholders. An area that has a lot of interest, and lately it has now spewed into bamboo plantations that are actually being planted outside of a public forest by private practitioners of forestry. In areas where we have rangelands, and we also have restoration efforts going on there, we know that this is the area with the biggest potential for reforestation. And we also want to get very closely, associated with those kind of activities taking place there. The zones, the other zones that are, buffer along water bodies, the dams, the rivers, others within private or public lands, we want to get very closely involved in that because it has a net effect of restoring our forests, and our forests are not limited to open lands, but that's such kind of bodies. The other areas is the highways that we have. If you look at the railway line that we have from Mombasa, the SGR, and all over the country, they have huge lands that can play a big role if they are forested, and in partnership with them in terms of trying to use part of that for forestation efforts, and therefore to contribute towards our commitments to restore the 5.1 million hectares. What do we have in terms of practices that we undertake to work towards these particular activities to restore? We are very keen as a service to use public awareness, campaigns, sensitizing people to grow trees in their respective places. National tree planting campaigns where we get out there and encourage everybody to plant trees as a way of restoring the various landscapes, whether they are in schools, whether they are in forests. And we have come up with a strategy through the leadership of the ministry with what we are calling adopt a forest, because we have massive areas that are degraded, some of which are in public forests, and we are encouraging people to adopt sections of forest organizations, up to and including some of our international stakeholders, including foreign embassies, to adopt some portions of forest where they participate in restoring, starting all the way from planting, maintaining, and ensuring that they continue to give the necessary environmental services that those forests could do. Again, lately, that we are all involved in the issues of urban forest, green spaces. These ones have caught up very fast because of the need to interact with the nature, particularly during this time of COVID. Forests, and especially for urban forests, have played a very critical role, and therefore this has heightened the importance of urban forest, gaining a lot of traction. The county governments are working very closely with us all over the country to establish these kind of forests. Yes, but having said all that, it is important to note that these activities and efforts that are occurring all over the country need to be monitored. We need to take stock of what is happening if we are to continually, look at how far we are getting to towards the 5.1 million hectares, we need to look at the efforts. How are they, adding up? How are the numbers adding up? And this can only be done through monitoring systems. And we have recognized the fact that first we have to secure what we have. In addition, now we move to the next step of adding much more, areas in terms of those degraded. So in order to do that, we are tracking very, very closely what is existing. And Kenya Forest Service is leading in terms of making sure that we track the existing, forest, the existing areas that are under forest, both private and public. And we have, supported by JICA and JOFCA, developed a software, the Chege Fast, that is have been very, very useful in monitoring what is happening with the existing forest cover. This is a freely online software that is able to detect changes every 1.5 months, and is available for use to monitor, to track what is happening with the existing forest cover. And therefore, anybody can be able to visit the site. I think I should have indicated a link there, but it's something we can easily provide to be able to visit that and use that to see what is happening with the existing forest cover. Because, like I said, it's important that what is there is first of all secured, or its status known, even as we move to more addition. The next one actually is the next system that we have already developed around here, which is the near real-time forest alerts. This one uses Sentinel data sets, and every 2 weeks is able to update what is happening over the landscapes. It looks at this week, and then next week to compare the data from last week and see what changes are there. And this, although it's a short-term, it takes a shorter period, the areas that's able to quickly detect is the changes. For example, if there has been any deforestation through various agents, there could be maybe cutting of trees or landslides or things like that. It is quickly able to be detected. It has been piloted in Kwale with a lot of successes. When the near real-time data is now sent to the database, this information is sent back to the respective areas through our system here. And by use of mobile, smartphones, you are able to, through a form that you have developed, able to validate this information using the survey 1, 2, 3. Both our partners, that is the communities, and our rangers are able to quickly look at that data and do quick visits to the site and verify whether this is actually the position. And in most cases, actually, this has been very accurate, and it prompts activities or actions to prevent further degradation of these resources. And communities have been very, very active in this, particularly in Kwale. It is one of the systems that we recommended to be taken on board in the National Forest Monitoring System. And I like what Dr. Musila, alluded to, that some of these are the ones that will need to be, integrated and coordinated within a better national forest monitoring system that can inform, landscape monitoring. Alongside that, of course, we have continuous efforts, like I have already said, that we have activities that are being undertaken, all around the year that we will need to track. And this, for this, we have developed an online, tree planting and seedling reporting system that is out there with our officers within the country. And using this system, they're able to report on activities on planting that has been done within their respective areas. And this is also georeferenced, and that information is rather the data is integrated within the system that we have to be able to say how much has been done within the the country, and that is trying to add up to the restoration effort that we are talking about. Again, there's also others out of that that we participate in as a service, and which require periodic reporting. Our officers working very closely with the communities, with other stakeholders, are participating in restoration activities all over the country. And this is an area that we have a lot of interest, because we acknowledge that the potential is not within public forests, because those are within constrained, or confined space. But the biggest potential is out there, and where these activities happen, there is need to track them very closely and report them accordingly, so that they can be taken on board. Again, we using periodic forest cover mapping, using remote sensing technology, and in conjunction with all our stakeholders, we are conducting, every 2 years mapping to indicate where the country forest cover is, for example. I think the last one that was done in 2018. We are currently working on the 2020 forest cover mapping, and this time we are lucky we will be able to do not forest cover mapping only, but also tree cover mapping, and working closely also with other partners. Some of whom are new in this sector in terms of monitoring forest activities, like the National Space Agency. There is one of our partners that is helping us actually to conduct cross monitoring of the cover within the country. This is important because we know, as our President, His Excellency, has indicated that we will be getting to 10% by 2020, and we need to know exactly where we are towards that, because it's close to that period, and need to indicate exactly where we are during that time. Now, in terms of plantations, as indicated earlier, this is an area that's a lot of interest because it is a commercial area with a lot of interest. In the past, there has been quite some reduction in terms of forest cover around this area. And the kind of monitoring we do in this is ensuring that we track the backlogs that have been there, how fast they are being covered, so that we can comfortably account for the area that have been actually restored using that particular area of the forest. I will say that during that time, we of course have had a few challenges, and basically is monitoring survival, because it's one thing to get out there and go and plant, but everybody is involved in. But it's another thing to monitor. After monitoring specific areas that have been covered, how then do you monitor that these areas have eventually been restored into forest, and how long does that take, so that we are able to quickly account for it? There has been a lot of arguments as to how long this can be taken on board, so that we can comfortably say that we have put up a certain percentage towards the 5.1. But that's a debate, and I think everybody is welcome to give their input within these areas. Again, poverty levels within the community areas that we are talking about here in the country plays a very big role, because if communities don't quickly appreciate the efforts that you put in place, sustaining those areas that we are saying we are restoring or tracking in terms of the efforts that you are putting in place are not sustained. You will need, and I know we have had discussion in this forum, to see how communities can quickly get involved in these restoration efforts, so that areas that have been put into some tree cover can remain as so, and not quickly depleted or turned back into some other use that are not compatible with restoration. Land tenure is another thing, of course, here. Areas that have no clear, distinct forest cover are continually having challenges, and these are some of the areas that we continually keep monitoring. And through the experiences that they are very shaky in terms of what you can actually say that is happening within there. Because one of those you will notice that because of lack of tenure, it is very difficult to ensure that restoration efforts are sustained. And therefore, even a monetary indicates as much, because it indicates a lot of deforestation in those kind of places. Again, the monitoring of areas that are less than 3 years, although we
one more minute, Mr. Chege.
Yes, so I'm finishing. We take them on board as having been restored, but the data availability for that through the monitoring system that we have is again an issue. Funding is one other area that is always continually a challenge because of the importance of this sector. It needs to be impressed upon funding agencies that it is an important area and that needs support. My last slide actually is just 3 lessons that we learned in the course of time. That it's important, like has been said by Dr. Musila, that we have an integrated online platform that that brings in all the stakeholders, the institutions, so that efforts are not disintegrated and therefore not being reported as appropriate. The use of citizen science, like the mobile application that we are talking about here, using communities has been noted to be very effective. We are scaling this to other counties. Currently, we are moving to North Rift, and we are going to use communities actually to monitor using the science that has been developed in Kwale. Then the use of private stakeholders in monitoring has become very apparent. We have engaged quite a number of them. A case which is going is East African data handlers that are very close with us in the monitoring of the restoration efforts that are ongoing in the country. We want to encourage others, and we are actually getting a lot of support and interest from others. So thank you very much for that opportunity to give my presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chege, for this very informative, very clear presentation that you've shared with us today. You've reminded us of the 7 priority landscape restoration options for this country, Mr. Chege. Thank you for reminding us. You've also shared with us the various techniques that the government of Kenya has identified to track tree planting activities on the ground, to track seedling planting and raising on the ground, and report those seedlings that are available. And you've also shared with us the techniques that Kenya Forest Service has already put in place to track forest cover change in this country using both remote sensing and mobile data collection devices. You've also shared with us lessons from your experiences that we should consider in this discussion towards an integrated monitoring and reporting framework for this country. Thank you very much. As we come back to the discussion, I urge everyone to note down their questions and their comments from this presentation from David Chege. Next session, we are going to pick from where David has left and discuss deeper into the experiences in integrating citizen surveillance and data collection. Something that Mr. Chege was talking about, engaging the communities in mobile data collection. So over to you, my colleague from C4 ICRAF, Tor Ghana, who is the senior scientist and head of spatial data science and applied learning lab at C4 ICRAF. Tor Ghana, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Thanks, Peter. It's interesting to see how well my talk today kind of fits into the previous talks, or follows on from the previous talks. And so I sort of decided last minute to make this talk about this combination of the use of citizen surveillance, or if you wish, citizen science, or crowdsourcing is also a term that you often hear, and systematic data collection. And I'll show you some examples of how we apply this in the context of the Regreening Africa project, which is going across 8 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So citizen surveillance is basically can be defined in this paper here. If you look at the bottom, you'll see the citation for the paper in case you're interested. Defines it as any type of activity that's conducted by volunteers, whether they're recruited or not, that results in monitoring or surveillance data. It's actually an area that has become incredibly popular. And we heard several mentions of this today or in earlier talks around the use of apps and the development of apps. And there's literally it's in a very crowded space right now around apps, for example, and that also presents some challenges. So while citizen science has become very popular, it can be structured or it can be unstructured. So typically where we have crowdsourcing, we talk about unstructured citizen science. While in some cases, as in, for example, Regreening Africa, it's a bit more structured. So it's citizens collecting data, but with some assistance and some training. And of course, there's a number of challenges with citizen surveillance data. And one of the big ones is really the trade-off between data quality and data quantity. And that really determines how we go about analyzing these types of data vis-a-vis, for example, more conventional structured data collection. Of course, the mobile apps is really part of why this is scaling so fast at the moment. Other end of the spectrum is basically what we call structured or systematic data collection and monitoring. So I'm mentioned a few things here, so I don't want to go into this in a huge detail, but of course these are generally approaches that are more costly and more challenging to scale than citizen science data collection, but they also tend to have higher quality data. So this is typically what you would do if you're a researcher or if you're a student. Generally, you would develop a sampling plan. You would have an idea of what you're sampling where, and there's all kinds of assumptions that go into that. But generally, we have higher data quality, but more challenging to scale with these approaches. So that sort of brings us to some examples of structured data collection. So one methodology that we've have been working on now for over a decade, actually it's more like a decade and a half, is the Land Degradation Surveillance Framework, or the LDSF. A lot of you have heard about it, I'm sure. It's been implemented in Kenya across large parts of the country. There's actually these markers on the map that you see on the left there show the center points for sites in Kenya. There's additional sites that are going into northern Kenya at the moment. Each of these sites is a 10 by 10 square kilometer landscape where we look at a number of different indicators: land cover, land use, land degradation, soil health, etc. So it's basically robust, and we can measure the indicators, and we use systematic field samplings. And then, of course, advanced analytics to allow us to predict land degradation processes, soil properties, etc. The slides are switching a bit slow in my end. So the contrast to this is citizen science data collection. And in Regreening Africa, we developed the Regreening Africa app. So yet another app. And you can download this on the Google Play Store if you have an Android phone. It's available there for free. It's used in the project by implementing partners, by other scientists, extension agents, lead farmers, and also nursery managers. So basically there are 4 modules in this app. It allows us to record and track tree planting, farmer managed natural regeneration, or FMNR, nurseries, and also training activities. And the application of the app by lead farmers is really one of the exciting aspects of this, not least in terms of scaling. It's available both in French and English at the moment, and so please feel free to go and explore it. And the Regreening Africa app can be used by any project, essentially. You don't have to be part of the Regreening Africa project to use it. So one of the good things in the app that we do is that we delimit the field boundaries. So when someone uses the Regreening Africa app, they walk the boundary of the fields, They look at and record the number of trees that are planted, the dates these trees were planted, if we're talking about tree planting, of course, the species, and they take the location of the trees in the field. And also, we look at survival of the trees. So we can track not just how many trees are planted, but also how many trees are surviving. So in other words, we have there, with those field boundaries, a spatial data set that we can use, and we can then relate that back to the information that we can generate from the LDSF. So here's just a landing page of the Regreening Africa Restoration Hub or dashboard. You can see the 8 countries at the top there, and just summaries of the tree planting recorded using the app below there, and FMNR practices by country also. So we see for tree planting in the project, Rwanda and Ethiopia are the 2 big ones, followed by Kenya. And then in FMNR, we have the West African countries, Senegal, Niger, and then followed by Kenya as well. Next slide, please. So the Regreening Africa Restoration Hub here, and this is the Kenya part of the dashboard, is where we are integrating all of this information, all this data. So integrating the citizen surveillance and the systematic data collection, and bringing it all onto one platform where anyone can explore the indicators, both in space and also over in time. So looking at what changes are happening. One interesting aspect here on the graph on the left there, the circular graph you see there, is from the tree planting module. And it just shows for one of the countries, for Kenya, where trees are planted on the farm. So the users of the app capture whether they're planting in a woodlot or on boundaries, in home gardens, etc. So that's really important information. In FMNR, we capture things like what the trees are being used for. Is it for construction, for firewood, fodder, etc.? So again, there's a lot of additional information that goes in, that is captured here beyond just the number of trees that are being planted. And this is really so that we can sort of look at the bigger picture of some of this as well. We also have another element of this where we are doing structured data collection, and that is as part of the monitoring and evaluation baseline surveys. So you see on the left there for Kenya, the main species that farmers are reporting through household surveys. So those are structured, very organized surveys. And then on the right there, you see the tree species coming from the Regreening app. So the crowdsourced or the citizen science data on the right from the farmer fields. So those are just some examples. And then just coming to Kenya, like zooming out again now, from the LDSF data, we couple that with the use of remote sensing or Earth observation. We use a range of different satellites and models building on this global network of sites that we have, and a large archive of soil samples at ECRAF here in Nairobi. So the left there shows soil organic carbon for Kenya, with the yellow as sort of low carbon and the dark brown higher carbon or high carbon. You can see Mount Kenya there, the Aberdares, for example, Mount Elgon, Mao Forest. So we heard earlier about the water towers, but these water towers are not just water towers, they're also carbon towers. And you can see that very clearly here in the map. On the right there, we have erosion prevalence predicted for Kenya. And again, black is low and yellow is high, so more degraded areas in yellow. So with this information from these maps and the information coming from the Regreening app, we can extract indicators from farmers' fields directly. So here's an example from Western Kenya, where we've been using the app, and you see the bottom right there are the farmer fields. And on the left is the prediction of erosion for the same farmer fields. So the exact same locations. And you can see the field boundaries in that high resolution map. And then we can take that field boundary and then extract erosion prevalence from that field. We're using the Regreening Africa app. And in Regreening Africa, we're doing this across all of the countries. So the graph that you see there at the top, the distributions there, basically show erosion prevalence, the distributions across all of the 8 countries in the data that's being collected. Now, what's really interesting about this is that it allows us to target restoration interventions. So we can use these predictions to identify hotspots in the landscape and then target interventions specifically around, for example, erosion or root depth restriction or soil properties like carbon, for example. So we can use multiple indicators. And then we can use this to assess the effectiveness of the interventions that are going in across scales. So in other words, it's all about sort of combining the citizen science data collected and the structured data that's collected, and to give us more robust estimates. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this amazing, inspiring presentation. You've shared with us inspiring examples on the use of this integrated citizen surveillance and data collection in FLR monitoring. And we look forward to discussing further with you on how we can use these experiences and lessons that you've learned in C4E craft towards building an integrated FLR monitoring and reporting framework at the national level in this country. So in the question and answer sections, we hope that you will still be around to answer a few questions from our colleagues. We see some of these questions coming in fast and furious. And I also want to encourage the other panelists to answer some of those questions that have already been submitted in the chat. Because looks like we will not have enough time to answer all of them during this session. Moving on, thank you again so much for that presentation. Moving on to the next speaker. The next speaker is my colleague from the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation at the Department of Water and Irrigation Management, Maurice Opondo, the Deputy Director. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Peter. I want also to join this college of people doing restoration. I don't know if they're called restorations. And I think I'm very glad to be in this particular conference. I will share with you landscape restoration from the agriculture perspective. I think the past speakers have talked more on the forest part, but I'll take a perspective of agriculture. Now, the mandate of the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation spans across water resources management, water services, sanitation, irrigation, drainage, and land reclamation. As you can see from this broad mandate, it is at the center of restoration. Talk about water, talk about irrigation, talk about land reclamation. All this is at the center of restoration. Generally, our main focus is availing water in sufficient quantity and quality to support development, provision of reasonable standards of sanitation, irrigation development, management and regulation, and land reclamation, especially reclamation of degraded lands. But our goal is to universal access to water, sanitation, food, and nutrition security. Now, in this discussion, I have defined the words landscapes, forests, landscape restoration, monitoring, agriculture sector, that is especially the food producing sector, and related sectors, including water and land. And then I'll be talking about the tools and the indicators, those I've defined in this presentation. Now, this is very important. When we are talking about restoration in the agriculture context, which are these lands that we are referring to? One, arid and semi-arid lands or bare lands, or you can call them water-stressed lands or soils. We are also putting the picture of rails and gullies and eroded lands. We also have quarries, mining sites. We also have lands affected by landslides or mass movement. We have saline and sodic soils. Saline soils are those soils that are salty and cannot sustain agriculture productivity. Marshlands, waterlogged, poorly drained lands where water stands and therefore crops cannot actually grow, especially crops that are not waterlogged, which don't grow in waterlogged areas. And then we have infertile soils and rocky soils, soils that are rocky and nothing can grow there. This needs to be claimed. Broadly speaking, in the agriculture context, these are lands that we consider as degraded that needs to be restored to support agriculture development and productivity. What are the measures that are being done to restore these various forms of degraded lands? Now, restoration is a slower process that actually sometimes you may not see it with your eyes, but after several couple of years, then you actually notice it has happened. For example, soils don't just become saline all over within a day, but slowly the soils accumulates, and then that particular land or soil becomes saline. And once it is saline, then it has to be reclaimed or restored to the former position so that agriculture production can happen. Basically, we do map such lands. We have done mapping for irrigated areas and developed a master plan. I think for the other areas or the other forms of degraded lands, the mapping is still in the process. So once mapping has been done, a master plan is developed to be implemented. Now, basically, out of those lands that are degraded for agriculture use, we have three broad measures to reclaim them. In some places, we call them physical measures, including filling up the quarries with topsoils, filling up mining sites so that you can use that land again. We also have measures we call biological measures, like agroforestry, tree planting, and forestation, so that you can restore the land. We also have chemical measures like liming acidic soils and also providing water through irrigation as a way to reclaim, especially water-stressed soils. But we know that other restoration options would include restocking of degraded natural forests or commercial plantations, all those, and also the buffer zones to water bodies. But the main approaches in reclamation is physical, biological, and chemical measures to reclaim the degraded lands for agriculture use. But what tools or method or approaches do we use in monitoring the efforts or measures that we put in place? I'll give my examples using irrigation and land reclamation. Now, the tools we use to track and try to detect and measure the impact of restoration are quite varied. Usually we have targets, maybe 5 years according to the MTP. Vision 2030 also has set up target of reclaiming 1.4 million, putting under irrigation 1.4 million acres by 2030. Now, we break this down into 5-year targets in the medium-term plans. The same thing happens with land reclamation. For example, in this particular medium-term plan, 2018-2022, we have set to reclaim 60,000 hectares of degraded lands, and many of these is towards agriculture production. Now, once with the target, we set baseline data sets as reference data, so that we keep referring to that baseline data. For example, we use at the end of the MTP or start of an MTP, we usually have a reference data that then we keep building as measures are implemented, then we track based on the reference or baseline data. The data then are periodically collected at local or site scale, and this is usually then aggregated. For example, we have reclamation programs in Turkana, West Pokot, Garissa, using water harvesting and storage. We also have several irrigation projects ongoing. So we keep collecting this data periodically across the country, then we aggregate together. So depending on the form of degradation, so various tools are being employed. I can categorize the tools into two: the earth observation and ground data surveys. The earth observation entails use of geographical information system, remote sensing technology, to estimate the areas restored through using the GPS coordinates. Then we estimate areas that are actually being put under reclamation or irrigation, so that we report, trying to be a bit actual and factual on the areas that we are either put under irrigation or we have reclaimed based on the various forms of degradation. The other approach is the ground-based periodic surveys or the databases to monitor restoration. This involves talking to people, preparing templates for the stakeholders or implementers on the ground to fill and submit the reports quarterly. We also have such reporting systems in our performance contracts. So then such information is consolidated from the various projects being implemented across the country and aggregated into a national figure. And moving forward, I'll be able to share with you some of the figures that so far we have received. We also have site visits where we visit sites and engage the communities about the progress of the reclamation that is happening. Now, we also have a very powerful tool called land degradation assessment. Land degradation assessment, we try to assess the severity of degradation. For example, we had one on the Magadi sub-basin in 2014. Right now, we are doing the Upper Wasonyiro North sub-basin. This land degradation assessment helps to unearth the extent and the severity of degradation in a particular ecosystem, and then it proposes what are the necessary interventions that we need to turn into programmatic interventions so that the reclamation can be done. So land degradation assessment informs the severity and what interventions needs to be taken to reclaim such lands. We have indicators for tracking restoration, and these indicators, I have classified them into two: output indicators and outcome indicators. Now, the immediate output indicators that we use include area of land put under irrigation. So this is very immediate and output oriented. Then also area of land reclaimed, degraded land such as arsal soils. When you just measure the area that you have put under agriculture use, you just measure the area. We also have area of farmlands under agroforestry. Then the UN land degradation neutrality is also now an output that we are trying to fast track so that whoever disturbs land makes sure that it is returned to more or less its original status before that land was disturbed. Then we also have percentage of a given land under tree canopy cover, for example, where areas where we reclaim using trees, and also the number of trees. So these ones are very immediate output indicators that we track. Then the next is about the outcome indicators. Once we have areas put under reclamation or irrigation, we expect some agriculture production to happen in these particular reclaimed lands. So we measure crop yield or products harvested, the volume either in kilograms of Kenya shillings of products harvested by year. Based on that reclamation that has happened, we look at the yields. We also look at the trends in land use after reclamation. What happens? What are the land use? What crops? What happens on that land? Then the percent of tree cover, that is more or less on long term, and this is especially for agroforestry. Then we also have the potential to look at the percent of improved livelihoods and resilience to climate change, and the number of beneficiaries that have been made resilient. Now, this is a slightly higher level of indicators that are monitored from after reclamation, and then what next? How does it benefit agriculture? So these are now at outcome level of indicators. This is examples of some of the data from monitoring. For example, in irrigation, over the years, in the year 2000, we only have 10,150 hectares. This has since moved in 2015 to 180, 505 hectares. Then in 2016, we had 209, 601 hectares. 2017, we have 193, 600 hectares. 2018, 203, 871 hectares. In 2019, we reached 201, 952 hectares. And in 2020, we achieved a total of 216 hectares under irrigation. Now, for land reclamation, this is especially entails areas related to soils and areas prone to flooding and landslides. We targeted 60,000 in 2018. We managed 45,000 hectares. And by 2021, we have put 60,000 hectares under reclamation. This is my concluding slide. We undertake land degradation severity monitoring, and we employ the methodology of satellite data imagery. In the year 1990, across the whole country, only 12% was classified as degraded. Another study was done in 2000. It raised the level of degradation to 22.1%. Then in 2005, we have 24.3% of our nation or land degraded. And if you see the trend now up to 2012, 25.3% is degraded. Now, this depicts a nation with an increasing level of degradation, but the rate of reclamation is lower than the rate of the reclamation rate is low, is going slowly compared to the rate of reclaiming the degraded lands. So I think this is something that is calling for action so that we as well speed up the level of reclamation to either be at par or surpass the level of degradation. Because at the moment we are in a situation where degradation is happening faster than the rate at which we are reclaiming back our lands. Sorry, I had some pictures for degraded ecosystems. Sorry, I didn't load them. I'll share them later. And I think that marks my slide on restoration in the agriculture perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bwana Morris Opondo, for that very informative presentation and very inspiring. Thank you for the transition to take us to the agriculture sector to hear more about your experiences in monitoring. You've shared with us on the various tools that you have been using to track the restoration progress in the agriculture sector. You've listed a list of outcome indicators that you've been tracking that would be useful and helpful for us to think about as we work towards an integrated forest and landscape monitoring framework for this country. You've also shared with us specific examples of data that you and the ministry is currently collecting and using for the decisions. And you concluded with a call for action for us to work towards reversing the trends in degradation, the fact that degradation is happening faster than the reclamation. Thank you so much for those very informative and inspiring points that you shared with us this morning. Next, we are moving to hear from Mildred Ada. Mildred will share with us on the findings from a survey that was done in preparation for this conference and in preparation to the pre-conference webinars that we had a couple of weeks ago. These findings are going to help us as we work towards an integrated forest and landscape restoration monitoring system. Mildred, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ndunda. I'm Mildred Ada, working with the Regreening Africa program. So I'm going to present some findings of a survey that we did. So the study is the restoration monitoring readiness in Kenya, and this was a rapid assessment. And you can see we worked together with some contributors. So the objectives is to build an understanding of the extent and type of landscape restoration initiatives, the monitoring indicators and tools and approaches used to measure and their effectiveness. And also this report would go into informing an integral landscape restoration monitoring, reporting and learning framework. So the information that I will present was captured from three main methods. There was the online survey that was targeting a wide range of restoration projects. These are projects from the government, from NGOs, from CBOs, from youth groups. The second method was qualitative data from the series of webinars that have been held from between 2020 and 2021, and also desktop review of restoration work in Kenya. So when the survey went out, it was an online survey. We got response from around 32 projects and initiatives. As you can see, the feedback from the arid and semi-arid region was higher. From Turkana, we got a response of 10 projects. Laikipia, we got 8, and Isiolo, we got 7. And this was interesting. Projects on land degradation were prevalent in the arid and semi-arid regions. And this was also in support of a report by the Ministry of Environment and Mineral Resources in 2016. We had no feedback from 15 counties, and this does not mean they do not have land restoration projects. It's just maybe the timeline, there was no response from 15 counties. So you can see from this word cloud, the restoration activities that are in the counties. The restoration activities that you can see that are larger means that more projects are reported, that this was some of the activities they were monitoring. You find, for example, reforestation activities are quite a number. Soil and water conservation activities are also more in different counties. Seedlings, establishments, tree planting, fruit trees. And also there are also policy and regulatory supports. There's agroforestry. So the ones appearing larger were reported more. Are the restoration indicators being monitored by the project survey? You'll find most projects said that they were monitoring the area of restoration. This would include the hectares of land reclaimed, the hectares under improved land management, the hectares under direct restoration, and hectares under reseeding with pasture or hay. Other indicators were the tree growth or diversity, the number of trees being managed, the germination, growth, and maturity of reseeding of selected sites. Others were looking at regreening action index, the extent of restoration practice, the intensity, and the diversity. Others were looking at the population benefiting. For example, the people trained, the number of people benefiting from forest landscape restoration interventions, the farmers integrating farmer-managed natural regeneration, the number of local community restoration crews employed and trained for restoration, the participation in training and also the extension on restoration approaches. The other restoration indicators being monitored was the alternative energy, carbon sequestration, the number of households adopting alternative clean efficient technologies, the number of CO2 being mitigated, and the number of and the reduction in cutting of trees, especially for charcoal production. Another indicator being monitored is the policy and enabling environment and institutions. This included the number and types of relevant forest landscape restoration related action plans and policies developed and adopted. Cross-sectional coordination mechanism in place, especially at the national level. Other restoration indicators included the investment tools being developed, and the improvement in the support of FOLAREP initiatives. Another indicator that was being monitored is the yield. This will include the yield increase. For example, if trees were being planted, how more trees were being, the yield that was being produced, the trees that were helping the farmers or the communities. The capacity and volume of water also being harvested was one of the restoration indicators reported by the surveyed projects. So you can see that most of these mostly activity and outcome indicator based, unless we're looking at the impact. So I'll look at the tools and the methods that are being used to monitor the indicators. You find that here also, the larger the wording means that this tool and method was reported more by the project. You find that, for example, the method of observation and site visit, most projects were using it, the use of surveys, the use of smart gadgets app. With the smart gadgets apps, we mean mobile phones and even tablets. And also other projects were using community feedback. Others were using reports and photography. So these are just some of the tools and methods from the surveyed projects that were reported as being used. So there were also challenges that were mentioned in developing of the indicators and the use of the monitoring tools. The responses, for example, we categorize this in 7 categories. I find there were technological challenges. Projects and initiatives said, for example, there were some of the, there was weak technological base. Some of the technologies were weak and some were not comprehensive. Some challenges were financial. There was no adequate finance resource for projects. Other challenges included human capacity. It was not enough. Data challenges. There were knowledge gaps. There was no previous programs or images for comparison. Data available is unreliable. Another challenge was the engagement. Find that some projects reported that low reporting was a challenge, insincerity from beneficiaries, and lack of goodwill and poor coordination between stakeholders. There are also biophysical challenges, for example, poor terrain, making the project sites inaccessible. There are also challenges because some of these monitoring tools could only measure the current status and could not show the progressive activities. So it was one of the challenges that was reported. Also challenges in the policy and legal framework, weak policy and legal support on restoration activities, and also unfavorable land tenure system. So in conclusion, I would like to say, for example, the next steps. This report it's a draft report, and it will be shared. The link will be shared in the chat, and we welcome all of you for suggestions, feedbacks on how we can improve the report, because the findings from this rapid assessment we can feed into efforts to establish a robust and integrated restoration monitoring framework for reporting and learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mildred, for sharing with us the results from the survey that was done in preparation for the series of webinars and eventually for this national FLR scaling conference. I want to encourage all of us who are participating today from various government ministries, from various stakeholders in FLR to share with us. And hopefully one of my colleagues will share the contact information in the chat so that we can all share the indicators that we feel would be important to incorporate, because I know it's not all of us who are able to get an opportunity to participate in this survey. Thank you again, Mildred, for sharing this with us. In the interest of time, I will also request that we skip the question and answer sessions now, and we move straight to the next speaker, my brother Patrick from FAO. The mic is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Peter. Thank you for the great work of coordinating this. Good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Mugi, working with FAO in monitoring and evaluation. Much appreciation to the organizers of this timely and must say important event. The opportunity to present on the frameworks that we are using at FAO for a project called the Restoration Initiative, which we paraphrase as TRI or TRI. If we go to the overview, just an overview of the TRI project. This is an initiative that is uniting 10 countries and 3 GEF agencies, that is FAO, UNEP, and IUCN, along with governments to basically overcome existing barriers to restoration and restore degraded lands in support of the commitments that the country has made, for example, the bond challenge. So the TRI is working in 10 countries, but with 11 projects. This is because we have 2 in Kenya, one being led by FAO and KEFRI, and the other one by UNEP and Nature Kenya. So the 5 that are being led by FAO are the one in Kenya, in Central African Republic, DRC, Sao Tome, and Pakistan. So the approach that the TRI is using is basically a shift from what we've been doing. Apart from assessing specific indicators, we are looking at a way of aggregating them and assessing a set of core indicators. We have 9 currently that we are using to assess this project. If I can give just an overview of how the arrangement is within the 11 countries, you can see how the reporting, how the advisory and evaluation and technical support is being coordinated in all the 11 countries to the FAO, IUCN, and UNEP coordination units. The green is going both sides, meaning technical support can go both sides, and the reporting, which is also reporting of monitoring data, is the blue that is from the countries all the way up. If I may go to the theory of change. The theory of change that the TRI is using is a strategy that has 3 pathways. One on policy, one on the FLR interventions on the ground, and thirdly, financial mechanisms. We all know that restoration is a costly affair. So those are the 3 pathways that our theory of change is using. Maybe if we may flip very fast to the next one. Yes. So this is the theory of change that we have. From the barriers of FLR, we are using now the 3-pronged strategy of policy, FLR interventions, and the FLR mechanisms. And you can see the outcomes that we are engaging and what assumptions we are making to reach to our TRI vision, which is to play a critical role in biodiversity conservation and climate change through sustainable land management. So the TRI approach, as I had said, is replacing the focal area specific indicators with a set of 9 core indicators. So I will want to flip very fast through these 9 core indicators that are being reported by the 11 projects in the 10 countries. So this is a list of the 9 indicators that are being reported throughout the 10 countries. And if you can see number 2 and number 3, this is where the core issues on restoration are. Area undergoing restoration. As we are aware, Kenya has committed to the 5.1 million hectares. So it is restoration. So under restoration, there are so many areas that we undertake to do the restoration. So what we have is a set of 9 core indicators, but those that are large, like now number 2 and number 3, we have sub-core indicators. So we can have restoration in agricultural lands, in forest lands, in shrub lands, in wetlands, what have you. So this is a list of the 9 core indicators where each and every country, irrespective of the restoration activities that they are undertaking, others may be doing agroforestries, others may be doing reforestation. We heard what KFS told us about the restoration options. With all that, there will be an area for each and every country to fit and report on what restoration efforts they are doing. So this one is just to help to decipher the difference, because we usually mix these terms. You hear M&D frameworks, M&D systems, M&D tools. So what we've had the various organizations describing, and what we had in the earlier presentation that was done in sometime in April, those are tools for data collection or systems that help us to collect data. But in terms of talking about an M&D framework, it is a methodology, or how are we going to aggregate and plan all these data that is with various organizations? How do we plan and aggregate and collect this data and report as a country? So for the TRI, each and every country has this set of frameworks. First, which is common to all, is a log frame. Beyond that, we have now the M&D plan that now describes when are you going to collect that data? How are you going to do it? Who is going to do it? Which data tool are you going to use? Who is going to be reporting on this data, on this every indicator? And when are you going to be doing this? So this is a plan on how you're going to collect information for each and every indicator. Remember now we've started with the indicators, you break them down to get some core indicators. Then you plan on how are you going to get this information. For example, is it KFS is going to give us information on indicator 1, KWTA, information on indicator 2, and so forth and so forth. So that is the M&E plan. So beyond that, we need to define our indicators, and this is what we call the performance indicator reference sheet. Each indicator is defined in terms of units, in terms of the data collection units, in terms of if it is restoration, are we talking of hectares or acres? So that's what we mean by units. So every indicator you define, where is the source of data going to be from? Is it going to be from the KFS data? Will it be from the Carefree portal? Because as you realize, we have so many sources of data. So we need to come with each and every indicator and define where are we going to be getting this data? How are we going to be measuring it? And when, in terms of frequency, are we going to be collecting this information? The other one is a performance indicator tracking table. The target for 5.1 million is by 2030. We should be able to track that after every 6 months or after every year, to what extent have we reached? From the data that we have collected, we should be able to have an indicator tracking that tells us where we stand as a country. For example, if today the president were to ask, in the 5.1 million hectares, where are we? We have data collected from every, as you've heard from the previous presenters, data is everywhere. But if you are to be asked from the 5.1 million, where do we stand as Kenya? We do not have that answer. Another framework that is required, and I think what FOLAREP is doing, is having an M&D calendar and budget. This is a gap in monitoring that always happens. When that question is asked, where have we reached? That is when people remember we are supposed to do monitoring. Monitoring should be planned for and budgeted for, like any other activity. So the other is what I was talking about, tools for data collection. This is different from frameworks. So what we have are systems or tools for collecting data. But as a country, we do not have a framework where we have coordinated reporting and tracking of our restoration efforts. So for FAO, what we are using for biophysical data collection is a tool called Collect Earth. And for carbon sequestration, we have Exact. And for the socioeconomic data, we are using household surveys. So in conclusion, then what are we saying? If for 11 projects in 10 countries and in 2 continents, Africa and Asia, we can be able to use 9 indicators to track restoration efforts in these 2 continents. In Kenya, we do not need hundreds of indicators to be able to track restoration. We can be able to have a set of core indicators that is easy and understandable to all. We have no shortage in data collection tools and systems. That is a fact we have seen from the presentations. What we lack as Kenya is coordination in aggregating and reporting available information or data. That is what FOLAREP is trying to achieve, as we've heard from the presentation from KFS. So this FOLAREP is a vehicle that will help Kenya to collect, track, and report on the 5.1 million target under the bond challenge. Though there's still much work to be done, and that is why we saw in the framework that was presented by Rose that there is a technical M&D technical working group that will do the much work that is still yet to be done to come up with this framework. And that one is still on course, and I will urge each and every participant or player in FLR to support these efforts to have Kenya reporting as one towards our restoration efforts. Thank you so much for listening. I will leave you with this illustration of collaboration of key sector players in FLR. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you, and back to you, moderator.
Thank you so much, my brother Patrick, for those very educative points that you've shared with us. Very grateful. Thank you for sharing this. It is very clear, my colleagues, it's very clear from this very informative, very educative, very inspiring presentations from the series of presenters this morning that we have many successful FLR monitoring activities in this country. whether at project level or at program level or even at subnational level. This already exists. So the experiences, the lessons, the tools, and the skills are here with us. They are in place. What we need to do next is to have a clear next step on how to bring all these lessons, experiences, skills, and tools together so that we can develop this integrated national forest and landscape restoration monitoring and reporting framework that will enable us to track and report progress against what the speakers were talking about, whether it's the 5.1 million hectares or the 10% tree cover, these national targets that we need to achieve. And to enable us to move towards that direction, I will transition to my co-moderator, Madam Lucy Waroingi, the Executive Director at Africa Conservation Center, who will tell us, how do we get there? How do we get there? So over to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Peter, very much for helping us navigate through that early morning section. Thank you, plenary presenters. You have really opened our eyes to the world of possibilities. In one sense, we are very encouraged about the progress being made on every front, and it brings us to the point we are, how we move forward in a manner where we can deliver as one, where we can synergize around everything we have heard. There's definitely ample capacity, there's variety of tools, there's different approaches and experiences, but of course we are all scattered in different places with different interests, but we have a common goal to see that our restoration efforts are not only successful, but are measurable, are reportable, and are having impact. So I'd like to invite Charity Munyasia, who's going to lead us with some proposals on a roadmap to moving forward. But I'd like to say that this session is for us to co-create. No one of us has the single bullet answer on how best to move forward. But I think we can pick a few ideas and agree to collaborate around those ideas and synergize and get the best outcome for this country. So Charity is going to have about 50 minutes to share with us a proposal for a roadmap and for a working group, and the framework look like, elements of what it should contain. But we'll then have some 10 or so minutes of discussion because we want your input also. So together we come out of this session with a few tangible takeaways that we can work on going forward. So allow me to introduce Charity Munyasia, which is the Deputy Chief Conservator of Forests in the Forest Conservation and Management at Kenya Forest Service. And she's going to lead us in kicking this off. And I ask that we continue to be attentive and engaged. And any comments that you would like to capture early, you're free to put them in the chat. We will allow some 10 or so minutes thereafter to discuss before we close out. Thank you and welcome, Charity.
Good morning, all. Thank you very much, Lucy. I want to say to all the presenters who have been there before, they have really given us great presentation. And I'm so encouraged that we can see we are in the right direction and the right track to achieve what we have promised to do as a nation of restoring the 5.1 million hectares. If we put everything together, the forest, the rangelands, the farms, we are going to be there. And as I make this presentation, is just an overview of the proposed National Restoration Monitoring Working Group. Yes, the goal of the National Restoration and Monitoring Working Group is to develop a shared vision for coordinated and integrated landscape restoration monitoring and reporting framework and mechanisms to ensure tracking of progress, reflecting, and learning. The proposed members of the National Restoration Monitoring Working Group, they include state actors and non-state actors. The state actors, the lead is the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. the Ministry of Agriculture, the Kenya Forest Service, Kenya Forest Research Institute, National Environment Management Agency, Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization, CARO, Council of Governors, Kenya Water Towers Agency, Kenya Wildlife Service, Directorate of Resource Survey and Remote Sensing, Water Resources Authority. In the non-state actors, we have the C4 ICRAF, World Resources Institute, Food and Agriculture Research Institution, WWF ICUN, ACCCI, Kenya Private Sector Alliance, Northern Land Trust, Greenbelt Movement, associations and societies like Team PD. This is not comprehensive. As we move the journey of restoration, I believe on the way we will require others or the others will come in. And every state actor and non-state actor is welcome in this journey because it's a Kenyan journey. It is not a journey of a few, it's because everybody is very, very important in this journey so that we achieve that which we have promised ourselves to achieve for the good of this nation. So the key tasks for the National Restoration Monitoring Working Group, they include that they agree on mandate, scope, roles, and reporting framework for the working group. As you have seen, we have different frameworks within our country, and we all need to agree on which one. The task working group needs to oversee a participatory process to agree on definitions, identify monitoring and reporting barriers and gaps, indicators for restoration, tools and approaches for data collection and opportunities for reporting. And also to outline the measurable and context relevant indicators, the outcomes and the impacts for restoration and requirements for tools that report on. Propose a national framework and process for a coordinated monitoring, reporting, and learning framework for forest and landscape restoration. The working group is also supposed to develop a roadmap for the implementation of a national framework for landscape monitoring and reporting for Kenya with the proposed timelines, roles, and responsibilities. Propose sources. The working group is supposed to develop a roadmap for the implementation of a national framework for landscape monitoring and reporting for Kenya with the proposed timelines, roles, and responsibilities. The working group is supposed to propose sources of finances and technical assistance to implement the national framework for restoration and monitoring and reporting. The proposed timeline for the National Restoration Monitoring Working Group are July to August 2021, the working group be formulated. And then September to November 2021, participatory review of indicators and tools, propose a national framework and process for coordinated monitoring, reporting, and learning. July to May 2022, the group is supposed to develop roadmap for implementation, capacity building, and initiate reporting. That is the overview of the proposed National Restoration Monitoring Working Group. And as you have heard from different presenters, everybody knows where we are going, and everybody is doing it so well. All what we need is to bring everything together so that we move in one direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chege, for that brief and concise presentation. And indeed, you've given us an overview of what we should be looking at when we move forward from here. And I'd like to open up an initial 5 minutes because we have about more minutes in total for this session. She's highlighted a few things. One is the membership of this working group in terms of representation. 2, the overall overview on the mandate and what is expected working group. And 3, she's also proposed a roadmap. And I'd like on those 3 areas to get some input, starting with number 1. Is there any member you feel representation of a sector is missing from the list that she shared. We've already seen in the chat the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation, and it's already confirmed would be included. Someone has also suggested the new Wildlife Research and Training Institute, which would be great because of tracking this also in our protected areas, and the research M&E to some extent fits well as a research agenda also for those who do so independently. And I would also endorse that proposal. There are other suggestions coming on the chat, the National Museums of Kenya. So perhaps in the interest of time, you can list them in the chat, and the organizers will then collate that and see that we are not leaving out any key sector, but also we're creating a working group of 100 people. Because as Patrick said, you want a working group that can work, and you also want to get quickly to your highlight indicators that are going to be trackable and really identify who and what where. But definitely the process needs to be participatory and inclusive. But maybe then we can speak about the mandate. Any other comments that anyone would want to add? I could allow you to unmute on scope that you may want to see included in the mandate working group. That's where the meat of the work is. So if anyone has a comment and would like to have that recorded, kindly raise your hand and you can unmute and make your comment on the working group's mandate and scope. All right, I will assume then that silence means that we are happy with the scope of the mandate. Of course, it is clear that the group meet and articulate detail how they want to go about their work. So this was really at a high level. And the final component is the roadmap. I'm seeing comments on the chat, Charity, that this is a working group, is an idea whose time has come. And so that's everyone's on board in moving forward, because a lot of the harmonizing of M&E done by people sharing these experiences and agreeing on a common framework of how do we contribute what we know, what we are doing, the tools we are using, and how do we scale up in a manner that helps us synergize better. So on the roadmap, it's an ambitious roadmap, but it's great because it has targets that are all within the year that we are in, between July and December of this year. Is there any comment on the roadmap? Maybe you can have that up. I don't know if you're able to get that slide back on the roadmap, and just to hear from the floor if there's any additional comment or input to that. Because if we agree on that roadmap, that becomes the task that we carry forward from this session today as the next follow-up actions. Formulating the working group is this month and next month, and then reviewing the indicators and proposing a national framework for coordinated monitoring between September and November, and then January to May 2022, develop the implementation plan, capacity building, and initiate reporting. Any comments on that? Is there anything missing in that proposed timeline? All right, excellent. So we will take it that we're all on board. I think what we would ask is that working group creates a feedback and communication mechanism. So I was going to propose that this working group would have to, in order to be transparent and accountable, make sure we are able to get feedback out to everyone who's interested in the progress and in what's emerging out of this, so that it is indeed a work in progress that is visible to all the actors. There's a lot of interest in us, not only tracking and monitoring in a coordinated manner, but also lots of the suggestions that have been in the chat here on policies and legislations, and identifying those high-level impact indicators and finding ways to M&E in project design. Those are going to be things we can all integrate into our programs once we get feedback on what is being developed by this group. So would like to congratulate ourselves for agreeing on a working group and a monitoring plan and a framework to kick this off. I'm not sure who will be the coordinating office, Public Kenya Services, or who communicates back from here going forward. Rosa Combo, I imagine it will be Kenya Forest Service.
Yes, we will communicate back.
Okay, great. And people in the chat have said if they want to get in touch, they'd need an email address. So for now, I propose you write Director Kenya Forest Service email, because then that goes to the central coordinating body. But I'm excited personally to see that we have made very quick, rapid progress in taking forward what we have learned. So we don't come out of this conference with great ideas on paper and great reflections in our minds, but we actually have an action on how to move forward. And I look forward to this being implemented over the next couple of months. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Charity. And I'd like to hand over back to you, Peter, for the closeout as we wind up this session.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for leading us so well. As you said, we want to be very inclusive. And at the end of the week, this roadmap will go to the Waziri Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, Ministry of Environment and Forest. And we want to ensure that the roadmap is a representation of the stakeholders, all the actors. So if you still want to say something, we would like to give you an opportunity. Lucy will come back if she has to. But if you feel that we've covered and we've represented you very well in the roadmap that KFS has presented, then we will move it forward, and through the leadership of Charity, it will go to the CS, and hopefully the working group will be officially launched at the end of this conference, and a point of contact will be established. We will be coordinating all of us to deliver this important product that we have all agreed is a missing link for sustainability in the work that we are all doing. So I'll take just a few seconds of silence to see if there's any quick reaction. None? Great. Thank you again. Thank you. First, thank you so much to my co-moderator, Lucy. We have a roadmap to deliver to the CS. We've delivered on our promise to him. This is really great. And thank you for leading us in this process. Secondly, I want to thank all the amazing speakers who spoke in this monitoring conference. Thank you very much, Rosa Compo, who started early in the morning from KFS. Thank you, Dr. Winnie Musila from KWTA. Thank you so much for your inspiring and educative presentation. Thank you, Mr. David Chege from Kenya Forest Service. We're very grateful for creating the time and sharing with us your experiences on monitoring FLR from the forest sector. Thank you, Tor Ghana, from all the experiences you shared with us on data collection and monitoring through citizen surveillance. Thank you again from C4 ECRAF. Thank you, Tor Ghana. Thank you, Maurice Opondo, for sharing the perspectives from the water and agriculture sector. We're extremely grateful for your time. Thank you, Mildred, for sharing the findings from the survey. We are extremely grateful for your time. And Charity from KFS, thank you for leading us through the roadmap for the development of this integrated monitoring and reporting framework for this country. Thank you. Thank you all the speakers. In addition, I want to thank all the organizers, starting with the Ministry of Environment and Forests, all the way from the CS, the PS, and all the government leaders who made this conference possible, including the pre-conference webinars that were held a couple of weeks ago. We are very grateful for making this happen. Ministry of Agriculture as well, the Kenya Forest Service, very grateful for the leadership at Kenya Forest Service that has been leading the organization of this conference. Thank you to Kenya Forest Research Institute. Thank you to C4 ECRAF, FAO, my colleagues at WRI, and many others who have been part of the organizers of this conference. And in addition, I want to thank all the participants for creating time. Over 150 participants have been in this conference today. We are extremely grateful for joining this conference that enabled us to share experience, but most important, a forward-looking conference towards developing this integrated and coordinated framework for monitoring and tracking and reporting our progress towards the 5.1 million hectares and the 10% tree cover in this country. Thank you again all. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to sharing the outcomes of this conference. Please join the closing session where the launch of the working group will be done by the CS or the PS at the Ministry of Environment and the Forest. Thank you again all, and bye-bye for now.